My name is Vinod Daniel. I am the chairman of AusHeritage and a board member of the International Council of Museums. I just thought I'll share a little bit on my interpretation on what's going to happen to the whole museum sector because of this COVID-19 crisis. I think it's a given fact that most economies would contract, and as part of this process, there is going to be impacts felt by every sector, including the museum sector. Now, with the museum sector, those who work within the public realm, who depend on funding from governments mainly, probably would have pressure on their budgets because the overall income that governments would get would decrease, both because of the lockdown as well as because of the contraction in GDP. Now, this might then translate into certain vacancies not getting filled up, certain capital works being stopped, etc., etc. But combining this with the other sources of income that museums depend on, which probably many of the museums which are non-public museums totally depend on, including ticket revenues, the income from selling merchandise, and people going to the cafeterias and eating, etc., etc., which are all going to be impacted. There's going to be a decrease in visitor numbers, especially international visitors. There's going to be an impact on how many people could be accommodated within a particular space because of social distance issues, etc., etc. So overall, my broad feeling is that the impact would be there, and the impact would be quite severe. But at the same time, it's also an opportunity for museums to rethink, reprioritize, and then keep marching on. So what I would like to do basically is to maybe bring out four things that museums need to do over the next bit of time, maybe over the next year to 3 years. The first one is, once your budget shrinks, or your budget is under a bit of pressure, you got to go back and decide what are the things you got to prioritize on. Of course, you need to prioritize on making sure your staff are there, they paid salaries, etc. But at the same time, you also need to prioritize on keeping the collections safe. This would mean in terms of how they are stored, making sure the risks from fires and disasters and insects and rodents, etc., are minimized, and a whole range of those kind of things. So I think the priority needs to be to make sure that collections are safe, and I would strongly urge most institutions to go do a basic risk assessment of the collections and keep that as a priority in spending, along with making sure your staff are there and they're paid. The second thing that they also have to think of is, at some time or the other, the museums are going to open up. People are going to come back to museums. And at that stage, it's quite important that your staff feel safe and secure, because when visitors come to museum, they come from all parts of the country, all parts of the world. And staff are going to be a bit worried about various things to make sure that they've got adequate precautions, they are have enough safety mechanisms, etc., etc. So make sure you prioritize on that too. Now, the third thing is, I think when we look at what the next stage in museum development is going to be, this particular crisis is going to highlight one thing. If people can't come and visit a museum, they would be quite keen for the museum to come and visit them. So this whole issue of digitization, taking museums online, making it exciting, interactive, having a little bit of a competition, with other online tools that one has, one normally uses, and making sure that, look, here is one more option for people to use. A country like India, we have tremendous IT capability. If we get this right and we can transform museum in that realm, which would increase audience numbers to a very high level, I think this might be the opportunity for India to leapfrog other museums and take it to a level that's even higher than what most Western museums are. Now, one of the key things here also for museums to consider is to make sure that they have enough mechanisms for revenue generation, because often with digitization, that's where a little bit of struggle happens for museums. They know how to collect money through tickets, they know how to collect money through other mechanisms when people come in physically. And here is a new challenge on both making it exciting and interactive for people to interact with collections and museums from their home, but also to pay for that interaction. And the very last thing I would strongly urge museums to do is, for a very long time, museums have been static entities, especially in places like India. It'll be great for museums to rethink in a way that they get now more interactive, more exciting, more relevant to today's society, not just a storage space for old objects, but a living space where they become a very interesting space for the general public to interact with. Thank you very much.